sarcopenia, arthritis, osteoporosis. Previously, we have shown that activity can combat these abnormalities that are typically associated with time passing on a calendar. Now, using fitness to combat Alzheimer's. Today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. This is your host, Garrett Williamson, president of Personal Edge Fitness, and I sure appreciate you tuning in. Before we get going, just want to let you know if you have any questions about this topic or any others, especially any of the myths associated with health, fitness, or wellness, you're welcome to reach out to us via email at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Via our website, which is, of course, personaledgefitness.com, and our Facebook page, Personal Edge Fitness. As always, feel free to contact us at either one of our locations in Mobile at 251-341-0927 or at our Eastern Shore location, which is 251-651-0927. You know, to know the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast is to know that age is a lie. You know, the fact that we deteriorate as time passes on the calendar is an absolute lie. And there's a lot of afflictions that are associated with time passing on a calendar. They're portrayed as inevitable, that it's going to happen as time passes on the calendar, and there's almost nothing we can do about it. And sometimes we think that, okay, well, we can fight it or combat it with different things, but it's going to happen. And that's just simply not true. And if anything that I was put on the earth for, as far as health, fitness, and wellness, it was to dispel that ignorance associated with time passing on a calendar. As I mentioned in the prologue there, that, you know, we've talked about sarcopenia, we've talked about arthritis, we've talked about osteoporosis, and whether they're not inevitable because of time passing on the calendar. And as with everything, they're not caused by time passing on a calendar. They're caused by one of four things: activity, nutrition, lifestyle, or mindset. And this one on Alzheimer's is no different. It's rather timely because of the pandemic, but it's also timely for me because of a few personal experiences. If you heard me talk about osteoporosis before, you heard me speak of the fact that the first time that I ever got to work with seniors, I had many seniors in my mentorship program that were battling osteoporosis. And at the time, we didn't have some of the wonderful medications that we have out now to battle this. The first one being Fosamax, which actually got an indication that it shows that it regrows bone, but we didn't have that back in 1993. And so getting osteoporosis was just, you know, you could manage it, you could do things to help you avoid fractures and what have you, but it was just inevitable. Something was going to happen. And I had several individuals in this program that I ran that suffered the effects of osteoporosis. They would fall and their bones would basically turn into sawdust. And it was quite sad. So I was very glad that, as always, the fact that health and fitness and wellness is an evolving field. It's an ongoing science. We're constantly researching new treatments, new ways of dealing with these things. But more importantly, we're finding out what we didn't know. There's so much that we don't know about the human body. We've been studying it since the 1700s, and we still don't know everything. And today's podcast is going to show you, again, we have found out something we didn't know. And this is why I think it's ridiculous to put a definite that time passing on a calendar is going to cause these afflictions. But just like my experiences with osteoporosis, this particular subject is near and dear to my heart because I've had clients, grandparents, or parents, or even themselves that have experienced this, been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Recently, I had a good friend that was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and we were doing things to mitigate it. But we all should be concerned about it because of the recent pandemic. A lot of time and a lot of effort was spent working with kids during the pandemic, and there was a big concern for the lack of their cognitive development due to the lack of social interaction, the lack of stimulation, and we were very, very attuned to that. We did a lot of things to mitigate that. Well, just because they are young is not the only reason to do that. It's not the only reason to do that with anybody. We have this same problem with our seniors. Our seniors that have been closed off, that have lacked stimulation, lacked that social interaction, same thing as kids, are seeing the same cognitive impairment. They're seeing the same problems. And incidence of Alzheimer's is somewhat growing, and definitely the problem is really being exacerbated by being closed off, the lack of stimulation. It's another proof that here we are worried about it with kids, where the same things happen with seniors, which is another sign that, hey, time passing on the calendar is not what we should be concerned about here. It's actually aspects of activity, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset that we should be concerned about. The other reason to address this is, as always, there's constant research going on, and we have some new studies and some new research that's come to light about Alzheimer's and how we can treat it with fitness and even possibly avoid it with health, fitness, and wellness. I will argue that we're going to see more and more evidence of this as time passes on the calendar. As we continue researching this, years from now, I'm sure we'll come out with more studies. We'll most likely find a way to prevent Alzheimer's, to prevent these things by using activity, nutrition, lifestyle, or mindset. Go back and listen to this podcast years from now, and you'll see that I bet you money I'm going to be right. And the reason being is that when we do these studies, we find out there's some inadequacy in one of those four facets that is causing whatever the affliction is that we are researching, and we're finding out if we change one of those four aspects, we actually change the affliction. Like with many of my previous podcasts, when I start on a subject, I like to start off with a simple definition. We hear about different types of brain afflictions, and we maybe not be too clear on what Alzheimer's means, but it's very simple. Alzheimer's is a type of brain disorder that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. Now, like Alzheimer's, we all have problems with memory, thinking, and behavior, even at a young age. I mean, I'll show you a simple example. That is something we accept. We think it's commonplace. We think it's very normal because it happens to all of us. So therefore, hey, it just happens and there's no reason behind it. Well, there is a reason behind it. But think about trying to remember somebody's name. When you first meet them, it's difficult for the information to reach the hippocampus, which is where we actually store kind of long-term memory information. So therefore, we can't remember somebody's name, or we get that very popular, I'm not good with names. But we do that even with people that we know. Trying to remember your neighbor's name. You're in a conversation, you're trying to remember your neighbor's name. The guy, the Lord, that you've been neighbors with him for 20 years, and you can't remember the name. What name is that? Well, we realize that we think that's normal, but it's actually caused by activity, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset. It's actually caused many times by just lack of water. And we made it about 8 minutes into this podcast before Garrett mentioned water. Imagine that. But 30% of the water that we drink is used by our brains. 75% of adults are walking around dehydrated, don't drink enough water. Therefore, that brain function is going to be affected. Therefore, something as simple as remembering somebody's name that you've known for 20 years, we forget it. We can't recall it. We accept that as normal, but it's really not normal. It's something we can control. And again, it happens at every age. So when we mention something like Alzheimer's and we call it a brain disorder, again, you can see where some of these things, quite possibly we're causing these to happen. Now, I said there was some research on it. We're going to get to that in a second, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the research for Alzheimer's, and the testing or research or studies that we can do on this are a little bit hamstrung. They're a little bit challenging. And here's why. The gold standard in modern medicine is a randomized, blind, placebo-controlled trial. It's usually a double-blind trial. And what they mean by double-blind trial, if you're not familiar with that, let's say we're going to test a medication and see if it actually does anything, if it actually works. We're trying to get some research done on it. So we're going to conduct a study, and we're going to have a control group. That's a group that they're just going to operate normal. They're going to not take this experimental drug, and we're going to let them run their daily lives, and we're going to measure whatever metrics we're looking for. And then we're going to have an experimental group, and that experimental group is going to be taking the medication that we're testing. In a double-blind study, the control group, both groups are taking a pill or tablet of some sort, and the control group is actually taking usually a sugar pill. It's nothing. It has no effects whatsoever, but they don't know that it's a sugar pill. They may believe that they're taking the medication. They don't know, and they're going about their daily lives. The experimental group, of course, is taking the medication that makes the change. And when they're when they're in the double-blind study, neither the control group or the experimental groups knows who's taking the sugar pill. They have no idea. So they're blind. That's the single blind. The double blind is when the testers themselves are giving out the medication. They know that we've got control group A and we've got group A and we've got group B. And group A is taking a pill and group B is taking a pill. The testers don't even know which group is the control group or the experimental group. Somebody running the study, of course, does, but the testers don't know. So therefore, you don't have human involvement or human influence on the study. And so that way, it's a pure study, and that's why it's the gold standard. When we're testing for Alzheimer's, that's difficult to do. What we're looking for, okay, enhancement in lifestyles. Well, it's really difficult to have a group that isn't being stimulated, isn't walking, running, or interacting with people, and then have another group that's not interacting with people and be the control group, and the two groups not know which group they're in. I mean, that's virtually impossible. So it makes it very different. So we have to use something you've heard me talk against many times, and that is observational studies. Now, excuse me, I'll try to get out of the weeds as quick as I possibly can, but I want to give a quick overview of that. Observational studies are typically, we're just observing a group doing their thing. We grew, and when I say a group, a socioeconomic, some kind of demographic, and we're observing what they do, and we're drawing conclusions from things that go on. The reason I've talked about that against it before is because observational studies are used a lot to prove that time passing on a calendar causes us to deteriorate, but it's not true because we're not looking at lifestyle, we're not looking at anything else. We're just looking at an age, and we're looking at the results of that age, and we're just concluding, well, when you're 60 years old, you lose strength. And we start coming up with these ridiculous ideas like sarcopenia that everybody, because of what we've observed, just happens to lose strength at such and such a percent every single year. Where we're not looking at their lifestyle, we're not looking at their activity, we're not looking at their nutrition, which is why I've preached against observational studies. But in this case, of course, observational studies do have a benefit. I've always meant that. I didn't like it when it was used that other way. So what we can test with the control and an experimental group is, of course, animals. And we're going to Mr. Mouse, the mice that we use for studies quite often. And we're looking at some studies there. But I think you're going to see some interesting parallels, especially to the situation caused by the pandemic and what we were involved in and what we were doing at that time. Now, I'm actually paraphrasing from an article talking about this study, but listen to this. This is interesting. Studies have compared the cognitive performance of mice who live alone in empty cages with those who live in large houses equipped with colorful Lego blocks for mental stimulation, running wheels for exercise, and other mice for social engagement. What does that sound like? I mean, it sounds like the pandemic versus the pre-pandemic, when we were living in empty cages without any stimulation, without social involvement, compared to situations where we had regular stimulations, where we had exercise, where we had social engagement. And that's what they did with these mice. What they found in this study is when mice lived in rich environments, this stimulating environments, the Lego blocks, the exercise wheels, their brains underwent physical changes. More neurons were generated in the brain's memory center. Now that's the hippocampus. That's what I was talking about earlier. And even mice that had their genomes altered to develop the equivalent of Alzheimer's experienced enhanced brain activity and performed better in maze tests that they had previously flunked. So we saw in these mice, we saw the ones that were in a stimulating environment, they actually, their brain changed. They built these neurons. They were either warding off or combating Alzheimer's, reversing the effects of it. And the reason I say reversing the effects, and I don't mind throwing that out there as being a huge possibility, is we've proved it before. We've proved it with osteoporosis, that we can actually reverse the effects of that. For many years, we thought we couldn't. Well, we can actually reverse the effects. And what do we use to do it? Well, yes, we did use medication, but we also use activity, nutrition, lifestyle, mindset. And medication, believe it or not, has to do with all of those. It falls under nutrition, falls under lifestyle. And so there's things that we can control. What I found also interesting in this study, and they also talked about the fact that it was difficult to recreate this in humans because of the participants knowing whether or not they were in a control and in an experimental group. And again, I'm going to quote this. I think that's interesting. All these findings come from observational studies. This is talking about humans that look at people's existing lifestyle and cognitive health as opposed to providing them with lifestyle treatment. Isn't that interesting? Lifestyle treatment, and then assessing cognitive outcomes. Now, the reason I bring that up, and they even mentioned this in the study, this isn't just Garrett saying something that lifestyle has something to do with it. That using lifestyle treatments, if they could do that in a controlled and experimental situation without the participants knowing, then lifestyle treatment could possibly enhance the brain and therefore ward off Alzheimer's. Now, we saw this in mice, and maybe I'm just patting myself on the back, the fact that here you are, they're talking about lifestyle. They're talking about lifestyle changes, making a difference in something that we have generally accepted as age-related. And, hey, look, if you get it, you get it. It's in the genes. There's nothing you can do about it, and that's just the way it is. Now, you've probably heard, or you probably know of, and you may do it yourself, of individuals that use, that read books or do crossword puzzles, things to work on the mind, especially as time passes on the calendar. And they're trying to, it's usually done out of fear, I hate to say, but they're doing it so that they keep their mind active because they're worried about dementia, Alzheimer's, these things happening. But they found that there was another study, and I actually spoke about it in a previous podcast, where exercise is that tenfold. It is far more helpful to the mind, helpful to the brain than doing just reading and or doing crossword puzzles or what have you, playing games. I'm not against those things. I think we all should continue reading. There's several researchers that have followed dementia, followed Alzheimer's, and talked about getting away from the TV and reading more. And I'm a big fan of all that. But exercising your brain through exercise has far more significant results than does the crossword puzzles and reading, what have you. Why? Well, it's pretty easy. Not only are we increasing circulation, and therefore feeding the brain with blood flow and good nutrients, and of course if you're drinking your water, that's even better. But you're having to think. You're having to maintain your balance. That works the cerebellum. You're having to remember, did I do 3 sets of this or 2 sets of this? You're having to remember to run your routine, work your routine as far as fitness is concerned. There was a study that was done quite some years ago, and it's become very popular as a treatment for Parkinson's, and that is using boxing to treat Parkinson's. And some of you may know about this. And what I thought was interesting was this made it to mainstream because there was a group that actually started that taught boxing, that started working with Parkinson's patients. And a lot of people believe that's great for the treatment of Parkinson's, but don't know that actually that's a great treatment for any kind of mental affliction, as far as dementia, Alzheimer's, or anything else that may be a deterioration of the brain. You may not know why, and what it has to do with, it's not the punching, it's not the making contact, as much as first and foremost it's exercise. I mean, we're increasing circulation, we're doing the things I was just talking about that exercise does, but more importantly, it's sequencing. And what I mean by that is increasing hand-eye coordination. But also, if you're learning the way boxing is typically taught, it's taught in your stance. It's taught in using your body and basically treating your arms like a bat or a weapon. And so it's not about throwing your hands; it's about using your body. And the interesting thing about boxing, I studied this. I will say I studied it. I did it through some workouts that I did, and it became a study of mine because I became fascinated by the sport and fascinated by the art of boxing. And I do call it an art because if we were to box the way if we were to walk the way that we box, we would walk swinging our right arm with our right leg. Now that may sound strange to you, but get up and go walk and you'll see you actually swing opposite arm, opposite leg. It has to do with balance. You do it automatically. You'll swing your left arm with your right leg and your right arm with your left leg. Well, when you box, you actually, if you throw the left hand forward, you put your weight on your left foot. If you throw the right hand, you put your right hand on your right foot. You put your weight on your right foot. The jab is pretty simple. because it's the first punch. It's the number one when you're counting out punches. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1. These kind of things. The jab is the one, and you basically throw that arm forward. You push yourself forward slightly and push yourself to your front leg. If you're right-handed, you actually have your left foot forward. Your jab is your left hand, and you throw that one, and you put your weight onto your left foot, which is in front. Feels very normal. Feels rather normal, even though it is same arm, same leg. It feels, if you're throwing a hand forward, you move your weight forward. When you throw the cross, I think the cross is one of the most difficult punches to learn how to throw correctly in boxing because it's seen so abnormal. You actually push your weight to your back foot when you turn the body and throw that cross. If you're right-handed, your cross is your right hand. That's the 2. If you're left-handed, of course, it's your left hand. And so it feels very strange. It's very difficult for people to learn that punch. We spend a lot of time teaching it. But that process in the brain of learning, first thing, if a trainer is calling out 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, you have to think, okay, what's my 1, what's my 2, what's my 3? And then you also have to think, okay, how do I swing my weight? How do I shift my weight back and forth? There's a lot of sequencing. There's a lot of brain activity going on, which is why that particular activity is fantastic for treating any affliction going on with the brain. And in this study, and there's other studies here too, but in this study, when they're talking about the mice, they're stimulating the brain through exercise. They're stimulating the brain through colors, what have you. Well, that particular technique, on top of any other exercise, I'm just happen to be picking this one. That particular technique does all of those things at once. And we can change the neurons in the brain just like we do in mice. And we know that if you don't have that diagnosis, there is a possibility. We haven't proven it yet. I understand that, but there is a possibility that we can ward off Alzheimer's through activity, through exercise, such as this. It's a form of treatment that we use in our facility with anybody that has that diagnosis. We use it with anybody. It's just a different way of training. I have a young athlete right now that just seems to fit his mind in that he likes it. He really enjoys it, and so we use that in his training. We use boxing training. But I have senior clients that have been diagnosed with aspects of dementia and or Alzheimer's, and we are using that sequencing to help them develop those neurons in the brain. To me, it's not groundbreaking. The study is not groundbreaking. It may be to you, and I hope it does kind of open your mind up to the fact that there is a possibility of warding off this horrible affliction of Alzheimer's. But it's yet again proof, the same thing I keep pointing out through this entire podcast, it is yet again proof that we don't know all there is to know about the body. And by using aspects of activity, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset, we can keep these things from happening. Don't believe that it's inevitable. Don't believe that time passing on a calendar causes it, and definitely don't give in to it. Now, if you have somebody that has this particular affliction and wants more information on it or is interested in getting involved in it, trust me, it is our passion. We would love to speak with those individuals. We would love to help those individuals get developed into this kind of program. And the first thing we're going to try to do, and we're going to constantly do, as I do in and day out with the discussions that I have with clients, with the discussions I have with staff members, with potential staff members, is changing that mindset. Don't give up. Don't think, okay, well, I can combat it, but it's going to happen. It's going to get worse. I'm just going to have it. That's all there is to it. We got to change that mindset. Studies such as this show that, hey, look, this is why we should change our mindset. And as always, when I'm talking about the live age, I feel like I'm proven guilty before I have to prove my innocence, and I'm guilty. Being guilty of that of that affliction is just assumed. Here's what I mean: I am sitting here making arguments against time passing on a calendar causing these things. Turn it around. There is no proof. There is no clinical proof that time passing on a calendar causes these things. And if there were, then you could prove it to me. You can not only prove it to me, you could prove it to me without using activity, a lack of nutrition, a reduced lifestyle, or an altered lifestyle, and definitely you'd have to take mindset out of there too. And nobody's been able to do that. Nobody's ever been able to prove that. Plus, you don't go to a health professional of any sort and they say, yes, osteoporosis is in your life and you're going to get it on this date. You're going to get it on this age. If it were time passing on a calendar causing it, they would be able to tell you that. By now, Lord, if they've been studying it this long, by now, they would be able to tell you it's going to happen on this date. Nothing Nothing is proved that way. Nothing happens that way. Even childhood development. We don't know when exactly the date for every person that puberty is going to happen. We know generally it's going to happen. We don't know the exact date. And so I'm beating it to death as always. Don't give in to time. Don't believe that these things are going to happen strictly because time passes on the calendar. I love the fact that we have this encouraging information about Alzheimer's. I mean, it's scary. I want to caution everyone about being closed off during the pandemic. And it's not that I'm not giving an opinion on whether or not we should have. We need to stay attuned to what that's doing to our mental health. What it's doing at every age to our mental health, especially to our seniors, that have already been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And we're seeing those changes. We want to make sure we are attuned to what's going on with that. As I said earlier, if you have, or if you know anybody that's been through this, please have them contact us. You can contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That is our website, personaledgefitness.com, our Facebook page, Personal Edge Fitness. You can call us at either one of our facilities at 251-341-0927 or 251-651-0927. Breakthroughs in Alzheimer and the treatment or the warding off of it through activity. Yet another thing that we do to help you live your level of wellness.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.